we are in a brand new series of discussions called Gifted. Gifted. Now, there's a word that's often thrown around in Christian circles, and it sounds like, a really nice thing. So it's the word blessing, bless or blessed. People talk about hashtag blessed all the time. We did a series a while back called hashtag blessed, happy people in the kingdom of happiness. You can go back on our YouTube channel and see there how we use the term blessed. But a lot of people misunderstand it a lot of times. Most people view it solely as you're blessed if you have a lot of money, or you're not blessed if you don't have a lot of money, right? Or that certain people get blessings and certain people don't. And really, it's a misunderstanding, or we even use it as a way to kind of put people down. If you're like me and you're from the South, or maybe from church culture, and you hear someone say, bless her heart, they're on either end of that, they're usually saying something pretty mean about that person, and then they say, bless her heart. And so we use this term bless, and we kind of just throw it around, and it's almost what I call like Christianese, right? Like the only people that really talk like that are maybe church-going people from certain parts of the world. But it is a term, and it is an idea, and it is something that is found really from the beginning of the Bible and the Jewish scriptures, and all the way through into the New Testament and the early church. We find this idea of blessing and being blessed. We talked about in our series, Happy People in the Kingdom of Happiness, that when Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount, his most famous sermon, he started the whole thing talking about certain people that were blessed. And they actually were people that others would have looked at and said they weren't blessed. Right? The poor in spirit, those who mourn. Jesus said that they're actually blessed, and we looked at that term in the language that it was originally written. It's this idea of happy. So happiness kind of has something to do with blessing, but it's not all-encompassing, as we're going to look at through the Jewish scriptures and into the New Testament today and throughout this series. And so what I want us to kind of wrap our mind around, first off, when we talk about blessings, we're going to talk about different kinds and what it really means. But as we get started, I want us to put our mind around this statement. Divine blessing always benefits the blessed, but is not intended to only bless the blessed. Divine blessing always benefits the blessed, but is not intended to only bless the blessed. So what I want to do is I want to look into the very first book of the Bible. It's called Genesis. incredibly important book. Tons of stuff goes on in the 50 chapters that is Genesis. It's everything from creation through the story of Joseph and the rescue that he had with his family and in Egypt. And so there's so much that goes on. And right at the beginning, we find that God actually begins to bless people and animals in the creation story. And we're going to move into about chapter 12. We meet a guy named Abram, whose name later would be changed to Abraham, who would have a grandson that was named Jacob, whose name would be changed to Israel. And we have this family nation, Israel, the Jewish nation. Okay, and so this is kind of where it all starts. We're going to look at where it starts, and we're going to see this idea of blessing, and I think maybe from a different perspective than we've ever seen it before. So let's look at what happens to Abram here. It says, the Lord said to Abram, leave your native country, your relatives, and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. This is a huge step. Abram was from a place that would have had a lot of different gods and a lot of different people telling you what the gods were saying. And so the idea that someone would be spoken to from God wasn't odd, but it was odd that this God actually would call him out of and separate him from his family, from his tribe, from his clan, and would actually take him to a new place. But we see that is the message that he gets. It says, I will make you a great nation. Now, what's interesting about this is we find out that actually his wife is barren and she can't have kids. So this is also an interesting thing to hear from God. God says, I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who treat you with contempt. And all the families on earth will be blessed through you. So we see that he tells Abram, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to give you things, and then you will be a conduit through which those good things go out to the rest of the world. And that leads us with our series idea worth discussing is this. We are blessed to be a blessing. Now, there's different types of blessings. When you look in the Jewish scriptures here, the word that is translated bless or blessing most often is a word that gets down to it. It's from the root word in the Hebrew language, the Semitic language there, that means to kneel. It's this idea of honoring and elevating someone else. And what we see throughout the Jewish scriptures is that different people are blessed by God and others through words, right? Words of encouragement. We see where they honor them in some way publicly. We see that they're given some kind of purpose. So we see that animals were blessed to procreate, right? And that human beings were blessed to procreate in the creation story. And so we see that there's this idea of someone is given a purpose and a meaning in life, a role or responsibility, and that is a blessing to them. And then ultimately what it wraps up in is this idea of gifts, right? So even Abram is going to be blessed and given gifts by various places that he goes to as he's going to this land that God's going to show him. And he was to take those gifts and the good things he got and distribute them and to be a conduit to also blessing others. Why? Because we are blessed to be a blessing. Now, one of the ways that we look at this post-Jesus, so all this stuff was pre-Jesus, we see the life and death and resurrection of Jesus, and then we see this new thing start, the church. And we see that God's grace then begins to bless these people who are following Jesus and who are in relationship with God through Jesus. And this is called often a spiritual gift. Maybe if you grew up in church, or you took part in church programs. Maybe at some point you even did a spiritual gifts assessment, right? To figure out what kind of spiritual gift do I have? And so throughout this series, we're going to talk about these gifts and what they look like. But today I really want to just introduce us to this idea of we are blessed to be a blessing. That we are given good gifts to be givers of good gifts. So let's look at these kind of in a broad spectrum, and then throughout the weeks we're going to get more and more narrow and discuss these and hopefully discover yourself the spiritual giftings that you have and how you can be actively using them to bless others and give good gifts to others. So here we go. Blessed to bless with belonging. Our gifts given to the world helps people believe they belong to God. When we take the good things that we have from God and we demonstrate those things, when we distribute those things, when we are conduits for blessing, people believe that they belong. That they belong to God, to Jesus, to the church maybe, but they feel a sense of belonging. Look at what Paul, who's writing a letter to the church at Rome that he had never been to, he wanted to get to, he never got there because he had heard about this church and all the good things that were going on, and he wrote them this wonderful letter. It's so rich. There's so much in it. And he says this, just as our bodies have many parts and each part has a special function, so it is with Christ's body. There's another way to metaphorically talk about the church, that collectively we are the embodiment of the Christ on earth. It says we are many parts of one body and we all belong to each other. Look what it says here. In his grace, God has given us different gifts, or he has blessed us. He's given us different gifts. Why? For doing certain things well. Right? God has given us this gift to do certain things well. Why? So that everyone in the body feels part of the body and they ultimately belong. So let's continue with we are blessed to bless with service. So there's Paul, and he was an early church leader and started these churches. And but really, the guy who Jesus used to start all this thing known as the church, his name is Peter, and he wrote a couple different letters to churches. And here's what he talks about in the same exact thing. He says, God has given each of you a gift. I mean, think about it. You talk about belonging, is that when I show up, I have a gift. When I'm a part of this, I have something to contribute. God has given each of you a gift from his great variety of spiritual gifts. So I show up to the table, I have this gift. It's different than everyone else's gift, but it's given me for what? For a reason. Use them well to serve one another. So we see that we're given this to serve. The gifts that you have, you can serve others with. This is huge to understand. We are blessed to be a blessing. And Peter just clearly says, like, you're blessed. You're gifted for a reason. That reason is service. And look at, lastly, is we're blessed to bless with love. Now, this is going to come from a really popular passage. You may, a lot of times, like it's kind of the prequel to what a lot of people read when they go to weddings, and it's talking about love. But what he's talking about here is sometimes better translated charity. It's this love in action. And look at what Paul tells the church at Corinth, they were fighting over their gifts and who had what gifts and which gifts were better than the others, right? Like the gift made them selfish, and they were competing over whose gift was more important. And Paul's going to tell them something about giftedness, about blessing, that I think is incredibly important. Look at what he says. If I could speak all the languages of earth and of angels, but didn't love others, I would only be a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. You see, one of the gifts was this gift to understand languages and communicate to people in other languages. And then often there was this gift that people called just heavenly language. It was this language that you only prayed in. And that's what he's talking about here. He says, if I could do both, like this heavenly language and this earthly language, and I can speak that and I can talk eloquently, I'm nothing if I don't love. This is so key to us when we think about our giftedness. He goes on to say, if I had the gift of prophecy, right, to be able to tell people, not just foretell, but to forthtell, like to tell messages from God to people, and if I understood all of God's secret plans and possessed all knowledge, and if I had such faith that I could move mountains, like all these giftings, these spiritual giftings that these people were experiencing, he said I could have all of these. But I didn't love others, I would be nothing. And so where the giftedness had made them selfish, he's trying to turn this around and say, no, you are blessed to be a blessing. You're nothing unless your gift is used in love. He says, if I gave everything, so financially say I'm blessed, but I gave everything to the poor and even sacrificed my own body, I die for my faith. I could boast about it, but if I didn't have love, I would have gained nothing. It just shows us that our gifts are to be gifted out. We are to bless others with what we are blessed in. These are good things brought about by our giftedness, but many times, what we see and what they work through in these New Testament letters is that people were so excited about the gifts, they missed the giver. They missed what really mattered. Paul tries to tell them over and over, different letters to different churches, love is what matters the most. But when we see everything as a gift, we become grateful for the giver. What if everything that you had, you viewed as a gift from God to use to be a blessing to someone else? Whether it's the home you live in, or the car you drive, or the money that you do have, the job that you have, the skills and abilities that you have, the heart that you have, the passion you have, it is all a good gift from a good giver. And when we see them as gifts, we become grateful for the giver. Thomas à Kempis, an early church writer and philosopher, said this: a wise lover values not so much the gift of the lover as the love of the giver. And ultimately, what being blessed does for us when we begin to bless others with this, is it puts us into a stronger relationship with God and others. It puts us into a loving relationship with the giver and to those with whom we are giving. It's all about love. It's all about relationship. Every good thing that we have is used to be blessed with others. Now, maybe you get this. Maybe you get this. This is just how you live. You have good things and you want others to experience it as well. But maybe you're a little selfish with your gifts. Maybe you're not, maybe you don't see the things in your life as gifts. Maybe you see them as burdens or as brokenness or as just another thing to deal with. Or maybe you see your giftedness as something that you'll never get to actually use. And I want to tell you, you're blessed to be a blessing. Things you have matter to the rest of the world. And the great thing about a community of faith is that we get to take all of those gifts collectively and we get to use them to show love and to serve and to bring people in to belong in this community of faith. And we get to show the rest of the world what it looks like to love each other and to serve each other, to sit with each other, and to talk with each other, and to care for each other, even in what are seemingly small ways. And so my hope is that throughout this series, you will recognize that you are blessed, but that you will more recognize you are blessed to be a blessing. You've been given good gifts so that you can give good gifts. This is what we're going to talk about today in our discussion group. As we think about that, I'm going to play another song, and I just encourage you to contemplate the blessings, the giftedness in your life, and just really prepare your heart, not just for today and today's discussion, but for all of these discussions. When we look at our giftedness, and collectively we ask ourselves, how can we put them to good use for God, for love, and to love our neighbor?